What makes a mother kill her own children? The question is so jarring, it almost feels unfair, an intrusion into the boundaries of the imaginable. But on the morning of June 20th, 2001, in a modest suburban home in Clear Lake, Texas, the unthinkable became real. Andrea Yates, a woman once described by friends and family as caring, reserved, and deeply devoted to her children, did the unthinkable. She systematically drowned all 5 of her children in the family's bathtub. Their names were Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary. The oldest was just 7. The youngest 6 months. This is not a story about monsters lurking in the dark. It's not about strangers or villains with evil grins. It's about the human mind, how it can fracture, twist, and turn even the purest forms of love into horror. It's about a mother's mental illness and the invisible battles fought behind the curtains of ordinary life. It's about the ways we ignore, misunderstand, or simply fail those who need help the most. But how does a woman go from singing lullabies to methodically taking the lives of those she swore to protect? That's the central mystery at the heart of the Andrea Yates case. A mystery that will force us to confront everything we think we know about sanity, sickness, and the boundaries of responsibility. In just 1 hour, 5 young lives were ended, not by an anonymous predator, but by the one person meant to keep them safe. Why? Tonight, we tear away the headlines and easy labels, plunging deep into one of the most agonizing, complicated, and controversial cases in American criminal history. The Andrea Yates murders aren't just a tale of tragedy. They're a collision of medicine, law, faith, and culture. A story about how society views women mothers, mental illness, and justice. In this documentary, we will explore Andrea's background. Who was she before that fateful morning? What forces shaped her life and beliefs? Follow the warning signs. What red flags appeared? Signs of depression, psychosis, and unraveling mental health that were missed, ignored, or tragically misunderstood. Reconstruct the morning of the murders. How did the unthinkable unfold minute by minute? What did Andrea say? What did she believe? Dissect the aftermath. How did the justice system, the medical establishment, the media, and the public react? Was she a victim or a monster? Was justice served? Interrogate the lingering questions. Could the system have prevented the tragedy? What does the case reveal about postpartum psychosis? And how are mothers suffering today still at risk? On June 20th, 2001, Rusty Yates left for work. It was an ordinary Wednesday. The Yates' home was quiet, the children finishing breakfast, Andrea tending to their needs as always. By 10 a.m., Rusty's entire family was gone. The police would arrive to find Andrea calmly calling 911, confessing to what she'd done. What happened in that single hour that turned a suburban living room into a crime scene? Did anyone see the disaster coming? And perhaps most chilling, could it happen again, anywhere, to anyone? These are not just rhetorical questions. They are the foundation of our journey, questions that demand not just answers, but understanding, empathy, and maybe uncomfortable self-reflection. As we move forward, we'll meet Andrea, as she was a young woman with dreams, a nurse, a wife, a mother. We'll watch as her world narrows, as pressures mount, and as the signs of her illness multiply. We'll encounter medical experts who tried and failed to intervene, family members who loved her but couldn't save her, and a justice system forced to ask, is madness a crime or a tragedy? We'll lay out the evidence, the diaries, the psychiatric records, and the chilling 911 calls. We'll challenge the neat narratives that the media prefers and instead seek out the gray areas, the points where certainty evaporates and hard questions begin. Can you imagine a moment when your mind becomes your worst enemy, when reality and delusion become impossible to separate? Would you have seen the warning signs in Andrea Yates? If you were her friend, Her neighbor, her doctor, would you have intervened? Or would you too have missed the signals? We open with a single shattering fact. In America, postpartum mental illness is the leading complication of childbirth, and yet it remains a subject shrouded in silence, stigma, and ignorance. Andrea Yates was not the first mother to break beneath its weight, nor tragically would she be the last. In the sections ahead, we'll set the stage. We'll establish the context, who Andrea was, who her children were, and what the world looked like on the morning of June 20th, 2001. We'll follow the path of warning signs and missed chances. We'll enter the mind of Andrea Yates, exploring the bewildering, terrifying world of postpartum psychosis. We'll walk through the justice system's struggle to understand and assign responsibility. And we'll end by asking whether anything has truly changed, whether in the shadow of this case we are any closer to preventing such tragedies in the future. We invite you, the viewer, to engage not just with the facts, but with the haunting questions at the heart of this case. Was Andrea Yates a murderer or a victim herself? Where does personal accountability end and illness begin? Stay with us as we enter the shadows of the mind, a place where love, faith, madness, and tragedy meet in the most devastating ways imaginable. It's easy to look back on the Andrea Yates case, as if it were inevitable, the path to tragedy lined with red flags and signposts that no one saw or heeded. But to truly understand what happened on June 20th, 2001, we must first see Andrea not as an infamous criminal, but as a complex, living person. We must step into the world she inhabited, a world filled with dreams, pressures, expectations, faith, and ultimately unraveling sanity. Andrea Pia Kennedy was born on July 2nd, 1964 in Hallsville, Texas. She was a quiet, academically gifted child, a class valedictorian, and later a registered nurse. Those who knew her described a woman of discipline and kindness, introverted, bookish, loyal, with an understated sense of humor. In 1989, she married Russell "Rusty" Yates, an engineer she met at her apartment complex. They settled in Houston's Clear Lake suburb, a growing neighborhood for young families seeking safe streets and good schools. Andrea and Rusty were committed to their faith, a blend of mainstream Christianity and the teachings of itinerant preacher Michael Waroniecki, who emphasized sin, damnation, and the struggle for salvation. Over the course of 8 years, Andrea gave birth to 5 children: Noah, John Paul, Luke, and Mary. They lived simply, at times frugally. At one point, the family resided in a converted Greyhound bus during Rusty's job relocation. But they always projected an image of loving, devoted parenthood. Behind that image, however, was a gathering storm. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, Andrea was alone with her 5 children in their small Clear Lake home. Rusty left for work, trusting, hoping that Andrea was stable enough for just an hour alone with the kids until his mother arrived. Within that hour, Andrea methodically drowned all 5 children one by one in the bathtub. She laid each child's body out on a bed. Then she called 911 and calmly confessed to the crime. The news would stun not only Houston, but the entire nation. The loss was incomprehensible, the crime almost mythic in its cruelty. How could a loving mother do such a thing? Why this story matters. The Andrea Yates case isn't just a tragedy for one family. It's a mirror held up to all of us. The stakes are impossibly high: 5 innocent children dead, a mother's life destroyed, a family shattered, and a justice system forced to confront its own limitations. But the deeper relevance is this: mental illness, unseen and unspoken. Andrea Yates was suffering from postpartum psychosis, a condition medical professionals knew about, but which remained taboo, misunderstood, and often dismissed. The price of silence. In the U.S., thousands of women each year struggle with severe perinatal mood disorders. Most receive little support, and even today, stigma and lack of awareness can have deadly consequences. Responsibility and blame. The public response to Andrea's crime split along fierce lines. Was she a cold-blooded murderer or a casualty of a failing mental health system? The case reignited fierce debate about criminal insanity, women's health, the pressures of motherhood, and the nature of evil. At the center lies a question that resists easy answers. Was Andrea Yates sane when she drowned her children? Or was she driven to madness by forces beyond her control? How much did her mental illness influence her actions? Could anyone, her doctors, her husband, the system, have stopped what happened? What does justice even look like in a case where victim and perpetrator are the same person? These aren't academic questions, they cut to the core of how we as a society understand crime punishment and compassion. The early signs and ominous foreshadowing. With hindsight, the warning signs in Andrea's life seem glaring. After the birth of her first child, she suffered severe postpartum depression. She attempted suicide twice in the years before the murders, once by overdose, once by holding a knife to her throat. She was hospitalized multiple times and prescribed antipsychotic medication. At her sickest, she was catatonic, staring into space, convinced her children were not safe. Family members, doctors, and even her husband knew of Andrea's struggles. The psychiatrist, Dr. Mohammed Saeed, warned Rusty, "Don't leave her alone with the children." Social services were aware that Andrea was deeply unwell, yet whether due to hope denial or the overwhelming pressures facing all involved, no one intervened decisively. There were also more subtle clues. Andrea's journals filled with dark thoughts and religious guilt. Her obsessive watching of preacher Warrenecki's videos about sin and damnation. Her growing withdrawal from friends and the outside world. Sudden medication changes and the abrupt cessation of Haldol, a powerful antipsychotic, just weeks before the killings. The puzzle is not just why Andrea Yates did what she did, but why no one, despite all these signs, could stop it. This story is not just a tabloid curiosity, it's a warning. It's about the hidden dangers of untreated mental illness, the weight placed on mothers, and the thin line between everyday struggle and catastrophe. It asks, could this happen to someone you know? Could it happen to you? As we move forward, we urge you to question what you believe about mental illness, motherhood, and the nature of evil. Have you ever ignored someone's suffering, thinking it was just a phase? Do you believe a person can be both victim and perpetrator? Would you have intervened if you saw the signs? We invite you not just to watch, but to wonder, to analyze, and perhaps to reconsider your own assumptions. In the next section, we'll begin our investigative journey layer by layer. We'll examine Andrea's life, her mental decline, the morning of the murders, and the critical failures that let tragedy strike. We'll see how faith, family, and medicine became intertwined, and how even in tragedy, Andrea Yates's case has changed the conversation about mental health and the justice system in America. To investigate the Andrea Yates case is to walk a twisting path through medical records, diaries, warnings, and courtroom drama. It means separating tabloid myth from documented fact and listening closely not just to the voices of experts and witnesses, but to Andrea's own words. What you'll find is a story as layered and unsettling as any in the true crime canon. We begin with the arc of Andrea's adult life, then zoom in on the weeks and hours before the murders. Along the way, we examine every major clue: psychiatric charts, hospital records, family testimony, religious influences, and above all, the evidence that points to a mind in torment. To bring these details to life, imagine cinematic recreations of the family's daily routines, shadowy flashbacks to Andrea's darkest hours, archival news footage, photographs of the Yates home, excerpts from Andrea's haunting journals, and graphics mapping her mental health timeline. Presenting the evidence and clues, the warning signs and downward spiral. First signs of trouble. After Noah's birth in 1994, Andrea suffered her first major depressive episode. She reported insomnia, overwhelming guilt, and thoughts of self-harm. Suicide attempts. In June 1999, Andrea overdosed on pills. Months later, she attempted to slit her own throat. Both times, she was hospitalized. Medical records describe her as profoundly depressed and delusional. Diagnosis: psychiatrists diagnosed Andrea with severe postpartum depression and, crucially, postpartum psychosis, a rare but devastating illness marked by hallucinations, paranoia, and detachment from reality. Medical interventions. Andrea was prescribed a succession of medications, Zoloft Effexor, and later Haldol haloperidol, a powerful antipsychotic. Hospital staff and outpatient doctors repeatedly warned Rusty and Andrea's family she must never be left alone with the children. Faith and isolation. Andrea's spiritual world darkened. She and Rusty increasingly sought counsel from Michael Woroniecki, a traveling preacher whose messages fixated on hell, sin, and the damnation of bad mothers. Andrea filled journals with religious guilt, self-reproach, and fears that her children were doomed. The final weeks before the murders, medication stopped. In May 2001, Andrea's doctors discontinued Haldol, which had previously helped curb her psychosis. Andrea's mother and Rusty noted her withdrawal, vacant stare, and slow movements. Alarming symptoms. Andrea stopped talking, stopped eating, stopped bathing. She barely made eye contact. She told Rusty she felt she was losing her mind. Her psychiatrist scheduled follow-ups, but didn't intervene urgently. Family's growing concern. Andrea's mother, Dora Kennedy, insisted on being present in the house. Social services flagged Andrea as high risk. But on June 20, 2001, Rusty left for work, assuming his mother would arrive shortly. The murders, minute by minute. Timeline: 9:50 a.m., Rusty leaves the house. 9:51, 10:00 a.m., Andrea fills the bathtub. 10:00, 10:40 a.m., Andrea drowns Mary first, then John Paul, Luke, and finally Noah, who struggles and runs but is caught. Aftermath: Andrea lays the children out on the bed, covers them, and calls 911. She is calm, almost detached. When asked what happened, she confesses without hesitation. Statements to police: Andrea explains, "I killed my children," then adds, "They were not righteous. I was saving them from hell." She shows little emotion, only relief that the deed is done. Crime scene evidence: 5 small bodies, clean and carefully arranged. No attempt to flee or destroy evidence. Andrea's clothes wet her face, expressionless. Contradictions, bizarre details, and unanswered questions. How could a woman so apparently psychotic plan and execute such an act? Some experts argue her actions show calculation. Others insist they reflect the logic of delusion. Multiple doctors and family members warned Andrea should never be left alone with her children, yet on that morning she was. Why did no one intervene? Andrea's claim that she was saving her children from damnation is hard for many to comprehend. Was this a desperate rationalization or the product of full-blown psychosis? Was Andrea a victim of her illness or a criminal who should have known better? The law, the public, and even her own family were deeply divided. The psychosis defense. Support: Andrea's extensive psychiatric history. Hospitalizations, suicide attempts, diagnosis of psychosis. Documented hallucinations and religious delusions. Absence of malice, gain, or attempt to cover up. Weaknesses: the systematic step-by-step method. Waiting until Rusty left. Could she truly not know right from wrong? The calculated killer theory. Andrea filled the tub, waited until alone, and called police after. Some suggest she knew the difference between right and wrong, fulfilling the legal criteria for sanity. The overwhelming medical evidence to the contrary. Lack of motive outside delusional beliefs. The religious and patriarchal influence. Preacher Michael Warrenecki's guilt-based doctrine may have fueled Andrea's fears. Families' strict beliefs and isolation from outside support. Millions share similar beliefs, but never commit such acts. Not all mentally ill mothers harm their children. Systemic failure. A cascade of missed interventions. Doctors, social workers, and Rusty were all aware of Andrea's instability. No decisive action was taken to remove the children or force urgent care. The benefit of hindsight. Could anyone have predicted the scale of the tragedy? Would you have recognized the danger in Andrea's symptoms? Should her husband, family, or doctors bear responsibility? Where do you draw the line between mental illness and legal accountability? How much should society intervene in a family's life? The human element. Andrea. Her sorrowful journals, soft-spoken words, and confused confessions. Not a monster, but a woman in crisis. Rusty grief, public blame, and the unimaginable task of surviving his children's deaths. Doctors tormented by the knowledge that their warnings were ignored. Children's smiling faces in photos, remembered by the world not for how they died, but for the brief, bright lives they lived. Just days before the murders, Andrea's psychiatrist wrote, "Do not leave this woman alone with her children." Why did the warning go unheeded? In a stunning twist at trial, a renowned psychiatrist's testimony was found to be false, forcing a retrial and throwing the entire case into question. The story is more than a crime. It's a tragedy of warning, misunderstanding, and the fragile boundaries of the mind. But as we reach the legal and ethical heart of the case, new mysteries emerge. As the facts settled and the initial shock wore off, Andrea Yates's story refused to fit neatly into any box, criminal or victim madness or murder. The legal system, the media, and the American public struggled to make sense of a case that shattered simple explanations. Now at the heart of this labyrinth, we arrive at the enduring, unanswerable questions that make the Andrea Yates case not just a tragedy, but an unsolved cultural riddle. How does a loving mother, under the care of doctors, watched by family, descend so deeply into psychosis that she kills the very children she adores, and no one can stop her? This is the paradox that haunts everyone who studies the case. It's not just that the system failed Andrea and her children, but that the boundaries of responsibility, sanity, and love seem to dissolve at the moment of catastrophe. The courtroom drama, insanity, or accountability. At Andrea's first trial in 2002, the prosecution painted her as rational, organized, and aware of her actions, a woman who understood right from wrong. The defense argued she was in the grip of a mental storm so powerful that she had lost all touch with reality. Both sides presented armies of psychiatrists, each dissecting Andrea's mind in excruciating detail. The jury convicted her of capital murder. Andrea was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. But the verdict would not stand. In 2005, her conviction was overturned after it was discovered that Dr. Park Dietz, a prominent prosecution psychiatrist, had testified falsely about Andrea's exposure to a TV episode involving a mother who killed her children and was acquitted on an insanity defense, a show that never aired. The error cast doubt on the entire process. In the retrial, the evidence of Andrea's mental illness was overwhelming. In 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security mental health facility where she remains today. The questions that will not die. Even after the verdict, new questions multiplied. Could Andrea have been saved? Her medical team, her husband, and social services all knew she was unstable, but the patchwork system of American mental health care failed to act. Was Rusty Yates at fault for leaving Andrea alone that morning? He has faced decades of public scrutiny and personal torment for his decisions. Did faith and extreme religious beliefs fuel Andrea's descent into psychosis? Michael Waroniecki's teachings, with their emphasis on damnation and maternal failure, echoed in Andrea's journals and confessions. Why is postpartum psychosis so little understood, and why does it remain shrouded in stigma even today? What truly is justice in a case where perpetrator and victim are so tragically intertwined? Each of these questions persists, gnawing at the edges of what we can know and what we must accept we may never know. The science and the shadows. The Yates case forced doctors, lawyers, and policymakers to reconsider postpartum psychosis. It's now understood as a rare but severe form of mental illness that can strike even those with no prior history, rendering sufferers powerless in the grip of hallucinations and delusions. Yet even with greater awareness, postpartum psychosis is often misdiagnosed, or inadequately treated. Andrea Yates's tragedy remains a warning one that 2 decades later still reverberates in newsrooms, hospitals, and family homes across America. Embracing ambiguity. Perhaps the greatest lesson of this case is how much we still do not know. Was there a precise moment when intervention could have made the difference? Did Andrea's husband and doctors do all they could? Can any system ever prevent every tragedy, or is the mind's descent into madness sometimes simply unstoppable? To watch interviews with Andrea in the years since is to see a woman aware of her crime, devastated by its consequences, and at times lucidly tormented by what she lost. She spends her days quietly, often making crafts for her surviving family. Her mind stabilized, but burdened with memory. Her case lives on in legal textbooks and medical journals, but even more so in the hearts of those who still debate her guilt and her suffering. Pique curiosity. Inviting reflection. Would you have seen what others missed? Would you have acted differently, or would you too have underestimated the dangers? Can we ever truly understand what it means to lose control of one's mind? And is there any such thing as justice when everyone involved is forever changed by grief and regret? The Andrea Yates murders remain at their core an enigma. They challenge us to ask the hardest questions about motherhood, illness, and accountability, and to confront the possibility that sometimes, even in the presence of love, darkness can win. The Andrea Yates case ends where all great tragedies do not with resolution, but with a wound that never quite closes. 5 children lost forever. A mother broken and institutionalized. A father haunted by the past. Doctors, lawyers, and neighbors each left with regrets, what-ifs, and the endless burden of hindsight. 2 decades later, Andrea's story remains a chilling reminder that there are no simple answers, only hard questions. The news cycle has long since moved on, but the echoes linger. Her name is spoken in whispers among those who study law, medicine, or motherhood. Her children's names, Noah, John, Paul, Luke, Mary, appear in memorials and in the minds of those who ache for what could have been. What keeps us coming back to this case? It's not just the horror. It's the way it peels back layers of assumption, exposing our society's failures and our personal fears. We ask ourselves, was Andrea a monster or a victim? Both. Neither. Did the system fail her, or was the system never built to catch those in freefall? Is there a moment where someone could have acted and everything would be different? How many mothers suffer in silence, unnoticed and untreated still today? The Yates case forced changes in the way postpartum mental illness is discussed. In the aftermath, there were calls for improved screening, better access to psychiatric care, and greater education for families. Yet stigma remains, resources are limited, and stories like Andrea's surface again and again in headlines, often with the same catastrophic results. The real human cost. For those closest to the case, the pain is forever. Andrea Yates lives in a mental health institution. She is medicated, monitored, and by all reports quietly devastated by what she did. She crafts greeting cards for her family, watches television, and receives the occasional visitor. Her lucid moments are said to be filled with regret. Rusty Yates remarried, tried to build a new life, but the shadows never fully retreated. He has spoken publicly about his grief, his confusion, and his ongoing struggle to forgive not just Andrea, but himself. The surviving family and community are left to grapple with the impossibility of closure. Neighbors who saw Andrea's decline wonder if they could have done more. Doctors review the case as a cautionary tale. Mothers who have suffered depression or psychosis see a version of themselves a warning of how quickly things can go wrong. What do you think? Was Andrea Yates a murderer or a woman lost to madness? Could the system have saved her children, or are some tragedies beyond prevention? Should the law treat mothers with severe mental illness differently than those who are simply cruel? How much responsibility lies with family doctors or society when the signs are visible but intervention fails? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Has your family ever struggled with postpartum depression? Are you a mental health professional with insight or advice? Your voice matters and could make a difference for someone else. This case isn't just about one woman or one family. It's about all of us. If you're moved by this story, talk about it with your friends, with your family, with your community. The more we speak openly about mental health, the more lives we might save. Invite others to join the conversation. The more perspectives, the deeper our understanding, and the better chance we have to catch the next warning sign before it's too late. If you found this deep dive challenging and thought-provoking, stay tuned. In our next investigation, we'll explore another case where mental illness, family, and tragedy collide, and ask if justice can ever truly bring healing. Don't miss it. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join us for more stories that challenge assumptions and spark real change. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth analysis where nothing is sugar-coated and every side is explored, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Every comment and share helps keep these tough, vital conversations alive. In the end, the Andrea Yates story isn't just about madness or murder. It's about how close all of us live to the edge of the unknowable, and how when darkness descends, a moment's inaction can echo for genera. The greatest mystery isn't whether Andrea Yates was mad or bad. It's why, in a world full of warning signs, we so often fail to see what's right in front of us.